Exactly what audience is Street Fighter 6 being made for? We turn to the Street Fighter 6 teaser to begin with, find that there are probably two main demographics Capcom is aiming at, wonder if aiming for a younger demographic is going to change gameplay significantly, and finally, does Street Fighter 6 Ryu look like a shirtless Joe Rogan? All in this week's episode of Talking Block. Yeah, I'm coming off of a nice little early week. I did some work in the front yard and did some landscaping, which feels nice. I played some Street Fighter V for the first time in a little while with my buddy Tyler. But before I go forward with that conversation, I want to say please Psycho Crush the like button and subscribe while you're doing that, because it's like just slightly, you just got to move your mouse a little tiny bit. We really appreciate it, and it really helps out the channel as we try to grow this thing. Thank you so much. But yeah, I was playing with my buddy Tyler, and I was using Luke, and in between a round, I felt convicted as I was looking at Luke's stupid face, and I said out loud, "Man, Luke's hair is really dumb." And he laughed, and I laughed, and we kind of looked at each other, and then at the same time I heard some kids out in the front, so I walked in, and sure enough, they were walking across the landscaping that I had just done, and I was like, what, how do you do that? So I opened the door, and I yelled at the damn kids in my yard, and then I turned around and looked at Tyler, and I said, "We're old, aren't we?" And we realized, yes, we're, and as I look at Luke, I know that it's been brought up within this teaser that there's this juxtaposition between the new age of Luke and the old school of Ryu. And it got me thinking, who is this game being made for? Who is Capcom's audiences? Because I think that there is at least two, probably more, but two significant audiences. And this kind of thing kind of pops up every time there's a new Street Fighter.
Yeah, the thing about it is we know every single time that there's a brand new Street Fighter game, it's going to piss off the hardcore people, the get off my lawn people like you. I love that you had a literal get off my lawn moment. That's awesome. Or get off my lawn.
That I totally didn't invent for that intro.
Yeah. It's every single time Capcom releases a brand new fighting game, I remember the Street Fighter 3 people. They're like, Street Fighter 4 sucks. It's a game for scrubs. It's the worst game ever, blah, blah, blah. It was not marketed to those people. It's marketed to the brand new people, the brand new up-and-comers, because playing fighting games long-term is something that most people don't do. After about 5 or 10 years, you're usually out. You kind of play that one game, and then you kind of move on from it. Some people play long-term, but those are few and far between, and you're so hardcore at that point that you're going to kind of play anything that you like. So
yeah, there's a whole bunch of potential in the new crowd, of course, right? Because you could bring in new people and grow your audience. But there's a certain sense of like expectation and culture and I dare say effort and time sunk into the old crowd. Let's call it the arcade generation. Yeah. So like the older crowd is like you still want to appease them, and they're going to be the ones that are really digging through your game, really finding the meaning of the things that you're doing, like we're doing here. Like I don't know how many newcomers are going to go back and try to like analyze these games and these what Capcom is thinking. And so there's a lot of juggling that Capcom has to do with audiences, whether it be let's make it for the esports crowd, or let's make it for the old school crowd, or let's make it for the newcomers, or let's make it for people that have been doing this for a while. And it seems like there's a lot of the old school crowd and versions of the new crowd. Yeah. So with Street Fighter 6, we don't have a ton of information. We have about 38 seconds worth of visuals, but we also have a history of Capcom's practices. And so I kind of just want to open this up for a discussion and say, like, what do we think Capcom is aiming for with what we've seen in Street Fighter 6? And we've seen two characters. We've seen Luke, and we've seen old, boxy, tanky-looking Ryu. And so people are talking about how Luke looks like new generation figures, right? Yeah. Such as Logan Paul, who really works because, he's a handsome dude. He's very prominent on social media. The kids are going to recognize them, a Logan Paul. And he's also involved with MMA, although as I was looking into his record, he's done a lot of like floofy, celebrity exhibition sorts of fights, and he usually loses those. So, but he is involved. He is a fighter. He clearly trains, and he also Luke looks like Ninja a good bit, the streamer. And that's interesting because Ninja is much more in the technological side of things and in the online world of gaming. And I think that there are going to be some changes in terms of how you reach those people compared to how you might have reached the arcade group of people, the arcade crowd. Do you have any reactions, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
So Luke starts off as a young, bright-eyed kid and, kind of thing, like, so optimistic and other stuff. And by the time we see him in Street Fighter 6, which it looks many, many years down the road there, Luke looks older, Ryu looks older. He's definitely lost that optimistic attitude, and he kind of looks a little bit like the Joker. But as you see, Logan Paul and stuff like that, that actually does kind of mirror some of these up and coming, personalities, influencers and stuff, because they kind of start off optimistic, and then you see them go a little ways down the road and they become the villain like Logan Paul and other stuff. So I'm kind of looking at Luke as definitely a protagonist, but a bit of an anti-hero as well, where he's not clear-cut good guy like Ryu. It looks like he's hit some hard times there, and he's kind of a little crazy, maybe.
We are in the age of anti-heroes a little bit right now, I think, too. That got the hair on my arms to stand up a little bit in excitement, because the idea of an anti-hero, there's a lot of fun you can have with that, right? You can have the corruptible person, and then, the parts of that are inside of all of us, the dark and the light. You can explore some of the dark in ways that you can't when you're just doing a goody two-shoes, Hollywood story. And so, man, that's interesting that they might go in terms of the story and the lore, where their protagonist falls into a darkness in a certain capacity. But, I think of Ninja, and I think of the way that games are played now, and it's such a communal thing. It went from a community within an arcade to a community that's like, the size and the scope of the internet. And we don't play games, by ourselves like we used to. You might have a one-player game like Breath of the Wild or something, but even then, you're usually playing with a stream, watching and commenting and talking, or you're part of that stream watching others. And a lot of the other games that are played, Fortnite and Minecraft, those are often matter-of-fact communal games where you're playing with other people that can jump in and out at any time and such. And I'm wondering, how do you feel like Street Fighter might evolve to fit in that space a little more?
Online play is going to become the number one way of playing the game. The number one ranking points and other stuff. We've already seen it with Street Fighter 5. I would love to see the people who say that online play is scrubby and other stuff like that go and point out one of the top league point players in the game and point out who that scrub is necessarily, like who that person really, is not capable of, playing well in offline tournaments and doing other stuff like that. Because that person, as far as I know, does not exist. If you're up there in like kind of the ultimate grandmaster or above, you're capable of winning major tournaments. And I think there's going to be a re-emphasis put on points and online play coming around. Now, offline play is still going to be the culmination of that, right? You're still going to have your Capcom Cups, your Evos and stuff that are offline. But I see a lot more seriousness being put into online play, into the points and stuff that they have there, because I think Capcom's going to evolve it even further. That's really where I see the genre going.
Yeah, and the issue with online play previously was that it wasn't a recreation of offline play because of lag and how that very much affects decision making, execution, and the like. But as we go forward, and as there's a special attention put on making netcode work, making netcode strong, and getting rid of that division between online and offline play, I do think that those issues will eventually fade away, except for those that are more like, what would you say, ideologically tethered to the idea that offline is better.
Those people are just freaking idiots, because it's literally because you can play a PS4 offline, and you can play PC online, and literally PC online is better than the PS4 offline. That's how come those people are idiots. They don't fundamentally understand how latency and delay and all that other kind of stuff work in these games. They just assume that offline play is going to be better because they're playing on a piece of crap PS4. Sorry, it's so.
I like how in order to edit that to say crap, you had to actually you lose the joke because PS. Thanks for keeping us PC.
Yeah, not a problem. So, anyway, it's such. I know, I saw that one too. So 10 points.
10
anyway,
points.
So
20.
yeah, bringing back an old school joke from the podcast days. But yeah, it's such a fascinating thing. And again, I understand the complaints about the netcode in Street Fighter V, but if you have a good enough connection, that's not too big of a deal. And again, just our whole community, all the other esports games have really wrapped around playing online and then having like, a major offline event and other stuff. And then, their ranking systems actually mean something. If you're climbing the ladder in these other games, online rank systems, it means something. And the fighting game community has not gotten to that point yet, but I really think it's coming with Street Fighter 6.
So, okay, then for those that make it past just the online versus offline, you might think, well, okay, so if you're going to make offline closer to online, a big part of that is execution. And while we're going to have a better netcode experience, it's probably not going to be perfect, at least not yet. And so what do? There's always been discussion of dumbing things down, not only for newcomers to do well, but also so that you can, play, how would you say it, with the less focused and less specific play that comes with playing online. Do you design your game around that? In Street Fighter 4, they put the ability to add network conditions in training mode, meaning you could have lag in training mode, practice in training mode, which I see that and go, I don't know, that's the wrong way of going about it. But the idea of creating that, making an environment where it's more catered to online or practicing in some way, and we have at least one mechanic that we think is going to be a major part of Street Fighter 6 in this sort of, Luke's flash knuckle, and how everyone can kind of do that combo, but not everybody can execute it on the level of where, you go to that next level if you're able to specifically time the release and the hold and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of gameplay, do you think they're going to go for this sort of watered down kind of a thing, or do you think that's actually going to be the key that sort of marries the two and makes everybody happy?
Definitely I wouldn't term it as watering down, but if you're designing games in this day and age without the ability to play them online, what are you doing? Because that's the main way these games are played competitively is online. Vast majority of matches happen that way. I think Capcom put out a stat like 500,000 matches a day, or a million matches, something like that, or maybe a month or something. There's a lot of matches that are going on in just Street Fighter V. But Harada actually talked about this with Tekken, and he said, a bunch of our moves are like 7-frame startups or whatever. We don't have the 3-frame startups that Street Fighter does, so we're able to mask the latency that's happening in the move startups and other things. And so this has been going on for a long time. People have been masking, are hiding basically latency in the startup of moves and other things like that for a long time. And so the answer to your question is an absolute yes. And they've been doing it, and they need to do more of it. This is the way these games are played. And if they're done well, that translates perfectly to offline play as well.
Right on. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic based on where Street Fighter V is now, and technology, and the fact that we have, as a community, been saying very loudly for a long enough time now what we specifically want, and it's been long enough for Capcom to hear and have time to develop a game in this sort of context. So I'm cautiously optimistic, and the cautiously comes from some of Capcom's other track record up until this point. But I do think that we might, at the very least, get something that is better than anything ever before in Street Fighter when it comes to being able to appease both the young and the old, the new and the returning, and the arcade culture, and like, what would you call it, the Twitch culture or something like that of today. And So I am optimistic, and I would like to know if you guys are optimistic, whether or not you think that Capcom will be able to pull off whatever it is that they actually need to pull off to make Street Fighter V successful across the different demographics that will most likely play it. So hit us up in the comments and let us know what you think on that. I have
Tell me
one
how big
more
of an
thing
idiot I am for
and how big of call Catalyst an idiot, because that's fun.
So.
Yeah, the John without the H, the one that spells his name incorrectly.
There you go. That's how big of an idiot I am. I can't even spell my name right. So there we go. Anyway.
So, okay, I want to speak just a little bit to Ryu and the old. We already discussed Luke and the new. And Capcom very often calls back to or uses similarity to very recognizable real life characters, because usually the celebrities that these that the in-game characters are compared to are characters in and of themselves. Most famously, and I dare say most infamously, it was Balrog and Mike Tyson. Of course, Balrog was originally named M. Bison, Mike Bison, and of course that was a little bit too close. But you also have so that's, you know, a huge boxing icon of the time. Tie it to it, people are going to recognize. And the point there is not to necessarily be as obvious as Balrog and M. Bison, Mike Tyson, but if people see your character and they think of something that they recognize, even subconsciously, that's marketing 101, right? So there you go. But they also did it with Alex and Hugo as Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant for pro wrestling back in Street Fighter 3. Abel, the protagonist of Street Fighter 4, not as obvious here, but he is very much based on a French judo Olympian and how do you say it? Fedor Emelianenko, a Russian MMA champion. Zangief, Fei Long, Sagat, those are all based off of real life people. You can look them up. And now Ryu, and actually Dark Horse did a story about Ryu's origins and how the newest Ryu kind of looks a decent bit like, what's his name? Masutatsu Oyama, the creator of Kyokushin Karate. Please check that article out if you haven't seen it already. It's probably not too far buried on the front page right now, and I'll link it up in the description of this video here. But you know, Ryu is even being the kind of everyman sort of a character is designed based on somebody else. But here's my question to you, John. Ryu, as he's reimagined for Street Fighter 6, is notably bulkier, kind of bigger, and he looks like when you stay in shape and continue to lift weights, but you are getting on in age. And there is a particular figure, I'm sending it to John in Skype right now. We haven't shown him this before, but I want to get his legit reaction to it. There's a particular figure who is both tied to MMA, is someone that 30 to 40-year-olds specifically very much will recognize and are in tune with. And when he takes off his shirt, looks pretty damn boxy like this. I'm not saying that his name was brought up in the discussion room or in the writer's room when they were thinking of putting Ryu together like this. But I mean, Logan Paul, MMA and everything, Joe Rogan, Ryu. What do you think?
I'm gonna get myself banned off the internet here in a second, but one of the reasons that was Aikman, I think, that when they were pitching the concept of G as a presidential character, he drew something that looked a lot like Donald Trump, you know, and Capcom's like, nope. You know, Rogan is not as controversial, but he's definitely controversial. So it would be interesting to see if they're kind of doing that. But that's Capcom for you. You know, transgender people are. Yeah,
I mean, he's a little controversial and loudly controversial by those that are kind of offended by it. But man, Rogan's not going anywhere. And the amount of people that, if you're a marketer, like the amount of people that would see that and positively react to it, even again in the subconscious, are far outweigh, I think, the kind of, you know, the Neil Youngs, if you will. But sorry, you were saying.
Oh yeah, no, Capcom's just no stranger to controversy of this kind of stuff, with Poison being transgender, Seth being trans robot gender, whatever that works and stuff. Capcom will generally invite this stuff in, but they'll only push it so far. You know, so it's an interesting thing. I'm not disagreeing that MMA and other stuff is very hot right now, and they're very clearly, you know, Hansel's so hot right now. They're trying to get in on that MMA action there, and that's Capcom's fingerprints all over that kind of stuff. Like I don't know specifically Rogan, but yeah, I wouldn't be shocked.
When you look at that image, though, do you not think that they kind of, you know, there's some similarities? Do you see it?
Some similarities. You're gonna have to stick a microphone in front of Ryu and have him talk about, like, you know, who would win between a kangaroo and like a rhino if they boxed or whatever. Then we'd be set. But until that happens, I don't see a heavy correlation, but I definitely see a passing one. So,
all right. So with that, if you would please head to the comments right now and let us know who would win between a kangaroo and a rhino
in a boxing match.
And also in a boxing match. That's yeah. And then also, if you want, after you've answered that, if you want to say whether or not you think that Ryu is somewhat connected to, or maybe inspired by Joe Rogan, the modern Ryu is, let us know in that too. But I had fun talking about this.
Yeah, me too.